Good morning, everybody. Let me start this morning of talking about experimental environments by giving you one perspective. Because what I always run into when I talk about labs is a lot of confusion. So what is a lab? How do I do a lab? How do we do labbing? Our perspective from research has three elements. One is that it is a multi-stakeholder collaboration. The second is that it's about a task in innovation or transitions. And the third is that some element of real-life experimentation is central to this collaboration. So using this lens to talk about labs, you can, from a research perspective, you cannot ask anymore, do we need labs, but really, how can we help labs to do these experiments? There are universities, there are industry sectors, there are citizens, there are municipalities, and all initiate their labs. And rightfully so, because we need all this experimentation to find new ways of working together and technologies which work with that in the future. So the question is not, do we need these labs, but how can we help these labs? And what questions can these labs ask themselves to talk about and to evaluate and think about their performance, what they do? So some of these questions could be, does there need to be trust before going into experiment? Or do scientific and business goals really match? Or who represents non-stakeholder, non-human stakeholders in the labs? And these are all questions we developed in a tool after our research. I wanted you to show you this tool here because I won't talk about tools anymore in this presentation. I want to talk about higher design principles for these environments. So the major question for us in our research was, how do we lab successfully? So what might be criteria for this? We can reflect on what we are doing. We started out together with my colleague Marie Genova at the Hague University to see what there is. That's what you do. You look, what do labs already evaluate? And I will be very short about this. You can read it all in a white paper we did. The 12 tools we found, which are already all over Europe, used by some labs, are very managerial. So they are about how a lab is organized, how experimentation in a lab is organized and iterated, and how a lab could be, what could be indicators in a regional context about the success of the lab. So what you get out of that is pie charts and spider diagrams and all these managerial visuals, but that didn't at all match with our experience collaborating in lab, which was that creativity and learning is so central to working together in labs. So we started out to do our own research, and we did that with 4 people, 4 lecturer researchers, and I want to shout out their names here because it's not that I did this alone. Fenne van Doorn, Janneke Sluis, Alice Schut, and Gabriela Bustamante majorly contributed to this research. So what did we do? We picked 4 living labs which had been active for some time, which are all partners of our research center, Mission Zero. They are all busy with circular economy or energy transition, but they are very different in who initiated them. So one is initiated by the municipality, the other by citizens, the third by University of Technology, and the fourth by the greenhouse sector, so by an industry sector. We picked these very different labs because we wanted to find out, is there anything in common between these? And what we found out is really, because we did ethnographic research, we did interviews, we did designed interventions in these labs, And what we found out is really that it is the creative and collaborative learning of the different stakeholders, together with the co-created technologies and new ways of working, which make the success of the labs. So this is really what you want to reflect upon and what you want to think about when organizing labs. I'm looking at the time, but I'm good, I think. Because what I really wanted to show you is these 5 principles. We could synthesize 5 design principles for experimental environments, which really helps and also give space for designers to intervene in labs. Because what was also very apparent in the 4 labs, which are very big labs we researched, was that designers and creatives were only active with little interventions, I would say, in these labs. They were not taken in and asked to really affiliate on a longer perspective with these labs and help them with this creativity and learning. So what are these 5 principles? Number 1. Resource dependability. So what we saw is that often using a lab methodology is a favorite methodology, but there is no dedicated resources for that. And that's a major challenge, because what you really need in a lab is a lab manager or a lab coordinator, someone who takes the skills and the lessons learned from one project to the next, so that you don't do and make the same mistakes in the first and in the second and in the third project, but you really learn from each other. And who also helps to orchestrate all these stakeholders, because we very easily talk about this multi-stakeholder collaboration. I see I need to stand here more, excuse me. But you really need to orchestrate that, because stakeholders from industry or from a citizen side, they talk different languages about technologies, for example. And you need to do a lot of things to bridge these differences in order to collaborate creatively together. Another thing about resources is a space of a lab. Physical space or temporary physical space seems to be very important, because it gives a feeling of community to a lab and also to the outside, an integrity and a brand for the lab. So resource dependability, and the tip, never do a lab without having some financial resources for it. The second one, very obvious one really, we know that co-creation is very important. The literature is all over co-creation and how important equal voices of the stakeholders in co-creation is. But when you look into the practice, you really see that it's not happening in a lot of cases, because there's power differences, there's differences of interest, which per se is not a problem, but you need to voice that and to work through that. And we don't have enough tools yet to do that, and also to empower groups who don't have a voice in labs, like non-human stakeholders. Third one, transparency about the level of participation. Often we see when citizens, for example, are participating, that it's not clear to those citizens what they are allowed to do in a lab. Are they just a sounding board, or can they really take the decision? And it's not always important to give everyone decision power, because it's also not practical and feasible in a lot of ways. But it's important to be transparent about that, to have the trust for this collaboration. Then fourth one, again one you would think experiment is a definition of labs, but a lot of labs don't get to this experiment. They get stuck in the discussion about what shall we experiment about. And that's very often because they have such a high level of what they want to experiment. In energy transitions, it's, for example, they want to immediately experiment with smart grids. And citizens don't even know what that is. So it's better to start with lower level experiments, like to do butterfly paths in a neighborhood if there is energy for that, and build that up to more complex experiments. And the last one, the balance of social and technical innovation. We all know that we need both. But lab core teams and stakeholders are often not very conscious about when they do the one or when they do the others, and sometimes overbury all the stakeholders. So it's good to be conscious about what you are doing at what time, and also to be conscious about that there might be some labs which lean more to technical innovation and leave the social innovation to companies who would market new solutions, and other labs who would, more concentrate on the social innovation around technical changes and around working together in the future. So these 5 principles we really found across all the labs, and they also give a lot of space for design, I think, and I'm very curious to talk about that in a minute. You can download all the tools and everything. We do the white paper via this code. And I just wanted to say also that we are in the next year as Future-Proof Labs project, we will work on the question when in the lab and how can creative make the most impacts. And we will work with that, with this group of partners, with design offices and with ClickNL. So thank you, and I'm very curious on your questions.
Thank you so much. Anja Overdiek. So let's quickly move to probably one question. If you have one, wave at me. If it's your turn, you can walk up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and ask away. I see your wave right there. So go on here for your Walk of Fame moment.
Morning, thanks a lot, Anja. My name is Sabine Wildevuur, Director of Design Lab of University Twente. I have a very simple question. Can experimental environments do without designers?
I don't think they can, no.
No, but why not?
Why not? Because if you look at the findings, it is this creativity and new ways of working together and reframing how we are working together, where designers are so good in, I think, which we need in experimental environments. And what I see a lot is that I find the designers only in the testing phase, where they would test new technologies. But we need them all over the process.
I agree.
And I'm sure many of you do too, right? Thank you so much. Dr. Anja Overdiek, thank you.
Thank you.